In 1978, America was entering a golden age of technological innovation. Computers were becoming smaller and more powerful, airlines were connecting people faster than ever, and universities were churning out new breakthroughs that promised to change the world. But in the shadows of this progress, an unknown figure was quietly preparing to wage war against the very fabric of modern society. That year, a strange package arrived at Northwestern University in Illinois. It was small, crudely taped, and addressed to a professor. Nothing about it seemed overtly threatening, but when it was opened, it exploded with a violent force that sent shrapnel tearing through the room, injuring the unsuspecting victim and shattering the illusion of safety that Americans had taken for granted. It was the beginning of a nightmare that would span 17 years. More packages began to appear in the mailrooms of universities, corporate offices, and airline facilities. Each time, the story was the same. Someone opened the parcel, and it exploded with devastating force. The devices varied in construction, but were always meticulously designed to kill or maim. No one knew when or where the next bomb would strike. Airports were temporarily shut down. Students and faculty members were afraid to touch any packages. Mailroom clerks across the country were terrified of doing their jobs. The FBI quickly realized they were dealing with a single perpetrator, a shadowy figure capable of constructing complex bombs while leaving no trace behind. They named him the Unabomber, a term derived from the FBI's case designation, University and Airline Bomber. But behind the alias was a man no one suspected, Theodore John Kaczynski, a reclusive former mathematics prodigy who believed that industrial society was destroying the planet and enslaving humanity. To understand how Ted Kaczynski became the Unabomber, one must go back to his childhood. Born on May 22, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, Ted was the eldest son of Theodore Sr. and Wanda Kaczynski, Polish-American parents who believed strongly in education and hard work. Ted stood out from the beginning. He was painfully shy, socially awkward, and preferred books to human interaction. At the age of 6, he was tested for intelligence and scored an astonishing IQ of 167. School counselors suggested he skip not 1, but 2 grades, thrusting him into classrooms with children significantly older and more socially developed. The results were disastrous. Ted, small and immature compared to his classmates, was bullied and ostracized. He felt like an outsider in every sense of the word. At home, his parents tried to be supportive, but they often misunderstood his emotional struggles. His mother, Wanda, was protective, while his father, Theodore Sr., a hard-working sausage maker, could be stern and distant. By the age of 16, Ted had earned a scholarship to Harvard University. For most teenagers, Harvard would have been a dream come true, but for Ted, it was a crucible. He was the youngest student in most of his classes and struggled to connect with his peers. Harvard's competitive environment only amplified his sense of isolation. It was at Harvard that Ted was unwittingly drawn into a controversial psychological study run by Dr. Henry Murray, a former OSS psychologist. The experiment was designed to analyze how individuals responded to extreme stress and humiliation. Students were asked to write essays about their personal philosophies, which were then used against them in brutal, mock interrogations. Participants were insulted, berated, and emotionally broken down while hooked up to electrodes. Ted endured these sessions for 3 years. The experience left deep psychological scars. Already withdrawn and socially alienated, Ted developed a profound mistrust of authority and a growing resentment toward the society around him. After Harvard, Ted pursued a PhD in mathematics at the University of Michigan. He was brilliant, capable of solving complex equations with ease, and his professors saw him as one of the most promising mathematicians of his generation. In 1967, At just 25 years old, he was hired as an assistant professor at the University of California, Berkeley. But the academic world did not fulfill him. Ted disliked teaching, disliked the pressures of academia, and disliked the increasing intrusion of technology into every aspect of life. After just 2 years, he resigned without explanation. No one knew it then, but Ted had already begun to reject the life society had mapped out for him. He saw industrial civilization as a machine crushing the human spirit and destroying the environment. He dreamed of escaping it all. In 1971, Ted left the city behind and moved to a remote plot of land near Lincoln, Montana. There, he built a tiny 10 by 12-foot cabin with no electricity or running water. He survived by growing his own food, hunting small game, and living off the land. For a time, he found solace in the simplicity of his new life. But that peace was short-lived. Developers began cutting roads through the pristine wilderness surrounding his cabin, and Ted was outraged. He saw the encroachment of modern civilization as a personal attack. His hatred of industrial society deepened into rage. He began to fantasize about striking back. Ted started experimenting with explosives, using his knowledge of chemistry and engineering to construct crude bombs. His first attempt, in May 1978, was the package bomb at Northwestern University. It injured a campus security officer but did not kill. Still, for Ted, it was the beginning of a campaign he believed would awaken society to the dangers of technological progress. Over the next 17 years, Ted would send or place 16 bombs across the United States. Each device was unique, meticulously handcrafted from common materials that were impossible to trace. He took care never to leave fingerprints, fibers, or other forensic evidence. Investigators were left frustrated at every turn. One of Ted's early bombs exploded aboard American Airlines Flight 444 in November 1979. The explosion filled the cabin with smoke and forced an emergency landing. Miraculously, no one was killed, but the incident marked a turning point. The FBI realized they were dealing with a highly dangerous individual capable of mass casualties. The Unabomber task force was formed, one of the largest and most expensive investigations in FBI history. Dozens of agents were assigned full-time to the case, analyzing every shred of evidence and following thousands of leads. But Ted remained a ghost. In 1985, the bombs turned deadly. A computer store owner in Sacramento, California, was killed when he opened a package containing one of Ted's devices. Later that year, a graduate student at the University of California, Berkeley, was severely injured. The victims were carefully chosen, each representing the technological institutions Ted despised. In 1987, a Salt Lake City computer store owner was maimed by another bomb. A witness caught a glimpse of the suspect, a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt and sunglasses, but the sketch that resulted was of little use. The attacks paused for 6 years, leading some to believe the Unabomber had died or been imprisoned for another crime. But in 1993, the bombs returned with renewed ferocity. Ted sent devices that killed an advertising executive in New Jersey and a lobbyist for the timber industry in California. He also maimed several other victims, leaving them with permanent injuries. By now, the Unabomber had become a household name. He was no longer just a threat to universities and airlines. He was a symbol of fear and frustration. In 1995, Ted made an unprecedented move. He sent letters to major newspapers, including the New York Times and the Washington Post, demanding that they publish his 35,000-word manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future. The document laid out his belief that technological progress was destroying human freedom and the natural world. If the newspapers refused, he threatened to continue bombing. After intense debate, The newspapers agreed to publish the manifesto in September 1995, hoping that someone would recognize the author's voice. That decision would ultimately lead to Ted's downfall. David Kaczynski, Ted's younger brother, read the manifesto and was struck by how familiar it sounded. The language, the arguments, even the phrasing mirrored the letters Ted had sent him over the years. David wrestled with the horrific possibility that his brother might be the Unabomber, but eventually he brought his suspicions to the FBI. Agents compared Ted's old letters with the manifesto and found undeniable similarities. Armed with this evidence, they obtained a search warrant for Ted's Montana cabin. On April 3, 1996, a team of FBI agents surrounded the remote shack. Inside, they found Ted Kaczynski, disheveled and unprepared for the sudden intrusion. The cabin was a treasure trove of evidence: bomb-making materials, detailed journals documenting each attack, and a fully constructed bomb ready to be mailed. The arrest stunned the nation. The man who had eluded the FBI for nearly 20 years was a recluse, living in a tiny cabin without electricity or running water. But the evidence was overwhelming. Ted Kaczynski was charged with multiple counts of murder and the transportation of explosive devices. To avoid the death penalty, Ted pleaded guilty to all charges in 1998. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families of his victims, the arrest brought some measure of closure, but it could not undo the damage he had caused. Survivors lived with permanent injuries, and loved ones mourned the lives stolen by Ted's bombs. The Unabomber case remains a chilling reminder of how one individual, armed with determination and technical skill, can hold an entire nation hostage. Ted Kaczynski's story is not just about violence. It is about isolation, resentment, and the dangers of believing that the ends justify the means. Even now, debates continue about the manifesto he forced the world to read. Some see it as the ravings of a madman. Others, disturbingly, view it as a prophetic warning about the perils of unchecked technological advancement. But whatever one believes about Ted's ideology, there is no escaping the reality of his actions. For nearly 2 decades, he waged a campaign of terror that left deep scars on the American psyche. He reminded the world that even in an age of satellites and supercomputers, a single person could bring a powerful nation to its knees. And it all began with a single package left on a doorstep, waiting to be opened. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button so you don't miss the gripping true stories we bring you every single day.